The Neighbor's Son, Part 1. A New Beginning. It was a quiet evening when Emily moved into the small, cozy house at the end of Maple Street. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She loved this time of the day. It was peaceful, and the soft breeze helped her forget the struggles of being a single mother. Emily had moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago with her 8-year-old son, Jake. She hoped for a fresh start after a messy divorce. Their new home was modest but comfortable. It had a little backyard where Jake loved to kick his soccer ball. Emily often watched him through the kitchen window while cooking or doing the dishes. It made her heart swell with pride to see him happy again after everything they had been through. One evening, as Emily was planting flowers near the fence, she noticed a tall, lean boy standing on the other side. He had dark hair and a shy smile. He looked to be around 17 or 18. "Hi there," he said politely. "I'm Ryan. We just moved in next door." Emily straightened up and smiled. "Hi, Ryan. I'm Emily. Welcome to the neighborhood." Ryan's gaze shifted to Jake, who was dribbling his soccer ball in the yard. "That's your son? He seems like a cool kid." Emily nodded, her face softening. "Yes, that's Jake. He loves soccer." "Do you play?" Ryan grinned. "I used to. Maybe I could show him some tricks someday, if that's okay." Emily appreciated the offer. "That would be great. Thanks, Ryan." Over the next few weeks, Ryan became a familiar presence. He would often come over to play with Jake, teaching him soccer moves and telling funny stories that made Jake laugh uncontrollably. Emily liked having him around. He was polite and respectful, and Jake had clearly taken a liking to him. But there was something about Ryan that felt mysterious. He rarely spoke about his own family. Emily knew he lived with his father, Mr. Adams, but she had never seen the man. When she asked Ryan about his father, he always gave short answers and quickly changed the subject. Emily didn't push him for more, assuming he just didn't like talking about it. One Friday evening, Emily invited Ryan over for dinner as a thank you for spending so much time with Jake. She made her special spaghetti and garlic bread. Ryan was polite as always, complimenting her cooking and even helping with the dishes afterward. For a moment, Emily felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It was nice to have someone else in the house, even just for a while. As time passed, however, Emily began to notice small, strange things. Ryan would sometimes disappear for a few days without any explanation. When he returned, he seemed distracted, as if his mind was somewhere else. He would laugh off Emily's questions, saying he had been busy with personal stuff. One evening, as Emily sat reading a book, there was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Carter, an older woman who lived a few houses down. She looked uneasy. "Emily," Mrs. Carter said in a hushed tone, "have you heard about the missing kids?" Emily blinked, startled. "Missing kids? No, I haven't. What's going on?" Mrs. Carter glanced around nervously, as if someone might overhear. A boy went missing last week, and before that, it was a girl from the next street over. The police are saying it's probably just runaways, but I don't believe that. You should be careful, especially with Jake." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. She had seen the stories on the news, but hadn't paid much attention. Now, the thought of something happening to Jake filled her with dread. She thanked Mrs. Carter and promised to be careful. That night, as Jake slept soundly in his room, Emily double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. She peered out the window into the dark night. For the first time in months, she felt uneasy in her own home. The next day, Ryan came by as usual to play soccer with Jake. But as Emily watched them from the window, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She told herself she was being paranoid. After all, Ryan had been nothing but kind. Still, a small voice in her mind whispered, "What do you really know about him?" Emily tried to push the thought away, but it stayed with her. She decided she needed to know more about Ryan and his family. She told herself it was just curiosity, but deep down, she wasn't so sure. For now, she would keep a closer eye on Ryan, and on the growing sense of unease she couldn't quite explain. Part 2. The Missing Pieces. Emily couldn't stop thinking about what Mrs. Carter had said. The missing kids, the vague explanations from the police. Everything felt too strange. She tried to focus on her usual routine, making breakfast for Jake, cleaning the house, and looking for a part-time job. But her mind kept wandering back to Ryan. Ryan seemed so normal, kind, polite, and good with Jake. But Emily realized she knew almost nothing about him or his family. Every time she asked about his father, he would change the subject. She had never even seen Mr. Adams, though Ryan claimed they lived together. Who was this boy who had suddenly become such a big part of their lives? One afternoon, while Jake was at school, Emily decided to do a little research. She wasn't proud of snooping, but she needed answers to calm her growing doubts. She sat at her laptop, typing Adams Family Maple Street into the search bar. A few old property records came up, showing that the house next door had been owned by a George Adams for the past 10 years. But there were no social media profiles, no news articles, nothing to give her a sense of who George or Ryan really was. Emily frowned. Most people left some sort of digital footprint, especially teenagers like Ryan. Why was there nothing? It only made her more uneasy. Later that day, Ryan came over to play soccer with Jake. Emily watched from the kitchen window, her eyes narrowing as she studied Ryan's movements. He was as cheerful as always, laughing and giving Jake pointers. But now, every little thing he did seemed suspicious. Why did he look around so often, as if checking to see if anyone was watching? Why did he always keep his phone in his pocket, never taking it out even when it buzzed? When the game ended, Jake ran inside to grab a drink. Emily saw her chance. "Ryan," she said casually, stepping outside, "can I ask you something?" Ryan looked up, his smile fading just a little. "Sure. What's up?" Emily hesitated. She didn't want to scare him off. "I was just wondering, I've never met your dad." Is he around much? Ryan's expression changed. His easy smile was replaced by something harder to read. He's busy. He travels a lot for work. Oh, Emily said, trying to sound unconcerned. What does he do? Ryan shrugged. Business stuff. Honestly, I don't even know the details. Emily nodded, but her mind raced. The answers were vague. Too vague. She decided not to press further. For now. That evening, as Emily was cleaning up after dinner, there was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Carter again, her face pale and anxious. Emily, she said in a hurried whisper, I just heard something. The police found another clue about one of the missing kids. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What did they find? Mrs. Carter glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. A backpack. It belonged to the girl who went missing 2 weeks ago. They found it near the woods behind the park. Emily felt a chill. Not fear, exactly, but something close to it. The park was just a few blocks away. Jake played there sometimes. They think someone might be hiding in those woods. Mrs. Carter continued. You should be careful. Don't let Jake go anywhere alone. Emily nodded, her throat dry. Thank you for telling me. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of the missing kids, the woods, and Ryan's strange behavior. She remembered how he always avoided talking about his family, how he disappeared for days at a time. Was it possible that he had something to do with this? The next morning, Emily decided to take a closer look at the woods. After dropping Jake off at school, she put on her sneakers and walked to the park. The trail leading into the woods was quiet, with only the sound of birds chirping in the trees. Emily hesitated at the edge of the path, her stomach twisting. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she felt like she needed to see it for herself. As she walked deeper into the woods, the air grew cooler, and the trees seemed to close in around her. She scanned the ground for anything unusual. A torn piece of fabric, a shoe, anything that might give her a clue. After about 20 minutes, she spotted something. A small clearing up ahead was scattered with bits of trash. Candy wrappers, soda cans, and an old blanket. It looked like someone had been camping there recently. Emily's pulse quickened. She stepped closer, her eyes darting around. Was someone still here? Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the bushes nearby. Emily froze, her heart pounding. She held her breath, waiting. After a moment, a squirrel darted out and scurried up a tree. Emily let out a shaky laugh, feeling both relieved and foolish. But as she turned to leave, something else caught her eye. Near the edge of the clearing, half hidden under a pile of leaves, was a black hoodie. It looked like it had been there for a while, dirty and torn. Emily's chest tightened. She didn't touch it but made a mental note of its location. She would tell the police about it later. When Emily got home, Ryan was waiting on the porch. He smiled when he saw her, but Emily felt a prickle of unease. Had he been watching her? Did he know she had gone to the woods? "Hey," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "Where were you?" Emily forced a smile. "Just out for a walk." Ryan nodded, but his eyes lingered on her a little too long. "The woods, huh? It's nice out there, isn't it?" Emily's stomach churned. How did he know where she had been? She laughed nervously, brushing past him to unlock the door. "Yeah, it's peaceful. Anyway, I need to get inside. Lots to do." As she closed the door behind her, Emily felt a wave of unease. She didn't have proof, but something about Ryan didn't sit right with her. She decided to trust her instincts and stay on high alert. Whatever was going on, she was determined to protect Jake, even if it meant uncovering secrets she wasn't ready to face. Part 3. Secrets in the Dark. Emily couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over her. Ryan's comment about the woods replayed in her mind, each word sticking like a thorn. Was it just a coincidence? Or had he somehow been watching her? The more she thought about it, the less it made sense. That evening, as Jake played quietly in his room, Emily sat at the dining table with a cup of tea, staring at her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wanted to search for more information about Ryan or his family, but she didn't know where to start. Instead, she opened a local news website to see if there were any updates on the missing kids. The latest article detailed the discovery of the backpack near the woods. The police were urging residents to remain cautious and report any suspicious activity. Emily scanned the article for clues but found nothing new. As she closed the browser, a thought crossed her mind. What if Ryan isn't who he says he is? The idea felt absurd. Ryan had been so kind to Jake, so polite to her. But Emily knew from experience that appearances could be deceiving. She had learned that lesson the hard way during her marriage. The next day, Emily decided to do something she had been avoiding. Talk to Mr. Adams. She figured if she could meet Ryan's father, it might help her understand the boy better. After all, parents often revealed a lot about their children. Around noon, she walked over to the house next door. The curtains were drawn, and the front yard looked unkempt, with weeds sprouting along the path. Emily hesitated for a moment, then knocked on the door. She waited, listening for any sounds inside, but there was only silence. She knocked again, louder this time. After a long pause, the door creaked open slightly, and a man's face appeared in the gap. He looked older than she had expected, with deep lines etched into his face and tired, sunken eyes. His hair was gray and unkempt, and he wore a wrinkled shirt. "Yes," he said, his voice rough. "Hi," Emily said, forcing a smile. "I'm Emily, your neighbor. I just wanted to introduce myself. Your son, Ryan, has been spending a lot of time with my son, Jake. I thought it would be nice to meet you." The man's expression didn't change. "Ryan mentioned you," he said curtly. "I'm George." "Nice to meet you, George," Emily said. "I was wondering if you'd like to come over for coffee sometime. It would be nice to chat." George shook his head. "I don't socialize much. Thanks for the offer, though." He started to close the door. Wait, Emily said quickly. I don't mean to pry, but is everything okay? Ryan seems like a great kid, but he's mentioned that you're busy a lot. I just wanted to make sure you're doing all right. George's face hardened. We're fine, he said. Ryan's a good boy. You don't need to worry about him. And with that, he shut the door. Emily stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. George's reaction had been cold, almost defensive. Something about it didn't sit right with her. She walked back to her house, her mind racing. If George wasn't willing to talk, she would have to find another way to get answers. That evening, Ryan showed up as usual to play with Jake. Emily watched them from the kitchen, her thoughts swirling. Should she confront Ryan? Ask him directly about the woods, about the missing kids? But what if she was wrong? She didn't want to scare him off or make him angry. As the boys played, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mrs. Carter. Emily, did you see the news? Another boy is missing. This is getting serious. Be careful. Emily's stomach dropped. She quickly opened the news app on her phone. The headline read, Teenage boy missing from nearby town, police suspect foul play. The article said the boy had been last seen near a gas station 2 towns over. He was 14 years old, with dark hair and brown eyes. Emily's chest tightened. She glanced out the window at Ryan. The missing boy looked a little like him. Could it be a coincidence, or was her imagination running wild? That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying everything she had noticed about Ryan. His disappearances, his vague answers, his knowledge of the woods. She felt torn between her instincts and her logic. Ryan was just a teenager. Was she really accusing him of something so terrible? Unable to bear the uncertainty, Emily decided to do something she had never done before. She waited until the house was quiet, then slipped out of bed and grabbed a flashlight. She had seen Ryan come and go from the backyard of his house several times. Maybe there was something there, some clue that could explain the nagging feeling in her gut. Emily crept outside, her footsteps silent on the damp grass. The night was dark, with only the faint glow of the moon lighting the way. She approached the fence that separated her yard from Ryan's and carefully climbed over it. Ryan's backyard was overgrown and shadowy. The shed in the corner caught her attention. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had forgotten to close it. Emily hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding, then stepped closer. She pushed the door open and shone her flashlight inside. The shed was cluttered with tools, boxes, and old furniture. At first glance, it looked like any other storage space. But as Emily's eyes scanned the room, something caught her attention. On a small table in the corner was a stack of photographs. She stepped closer and picked up the top photo. Her breath caught in her throat. The photo was of the missing girl from the news, smiling and holding a soccer ball. Emily flipped through the stack, her hands shaking. There were more photos. Different kids, all of them smiling, all of them familiar from the news reports. Emily's mind raced. Why did Ryan have these photos? What did it mean? She felt a wave of panic rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She needed to get out of there and call the police. As she turned to leave, a voice spoke from the darkness. "What are you doing in here?" Emily froze, her flashlight shaking in her hand. She turned slowly to see Ryan standing in the doorway, his face shadowed but his voice calm. I was just," Emily stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Ryan stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here, Emily." For the first time, Emily felt truly afraid. She clutched the flashlight tighter, her mind racing for a way to escape. Whatever was happening, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't safe anymore. Part 4. A web of lies. Emily's heart pounded as Ryan stepped closer, his calm voice sending a shiver of fear through her. She tried to think of an excuse, anything to explain why she was in the shed, but her mind was blank. "I heard a noise," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I thought someone might need help." Ryan tilted his head, his expression blank. "A noise? At this time of night?" He stepped to the side, blocking her path to the door. Emily gripped the flashlight tightly, her palms slick with sweat. "Yes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll just go now." Ryan didn't move. Instead, he glanced at the photos in her hand. "You shouldn't be touching those." Emily's fingers tightened around the stack of photos. "Ryan, why do you have these? These kids? They're missing." Ryan's face remained calm, but his eyes darkened. "They're my friends," he said softly. "I like to remember them." Emily felt a wave of confusion and fear. "Ryan, this doesn't make sense. Why would you have these photos? Did you take them? Do you know where these kids are?" Ryan's lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You ask a lot of questions, Emily." Before she could respond, a voice called out from the house. "Ryan, what are you doing out there?" It was George. His voice sounded sharp, almost angry. Ryan's expression flickered, and he stepped back from the door. "Go home, Emily," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have come here." Emily didn't need to be told twice. She hurried out of the shed, her legs trembling, and climbed back over the fence into her yard. She rushed into her house, locking the door behind her. Her mind was racing. The photos, Ryan's strange behavior, and now George. Something was very wrong. The next morning, Emily debated what to do. Should she call the police? But what would she say? That her teenage neighbor had a collection of photos of missing children? It wasn't exactly solid evidence. And what if she was wrong? What if Ryan really was just a lonely boy with a strange hobby? She decided to wait and gather more information. She would keep a closer eye on Ryan and his family. If she noticed anything else suspicious, she would go to the authorities. As the day went on, Emily tried to act normal. She took Jake to the park, went grocery shopping, and chatted with Mrs. Carter when she came by to drop off some cookies. but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the previous night. When evening came, Emily was surprised to see George knocking on her door. She hesitated, then opened it. "Hi, George," she said, trying to sound casual. "What brings you here?" George looked uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize for Ryan," he said. "He told me you were in the shed last night. I hope he didn't scare you." Emily blinked, unsure of how to respond. "No, it's okay," she said cautiously. "I was just worried. I thought I heard something." George nodded slowly. "Ryan can be odd sometimes," he admitted. "He's been through a lot since his mother passed away. I'm trying my best, but it's not easy." Emily felt a pang of sympathy. Maybe she had been too quick to judge. "I understand," she said. "If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." George smiled faintly. "Thank you. And please, don't worry about Ryan. He's a good boy. He wouldn't hurt anyone." Despite George's reassurances, Emily couldn't shake her doubts. That night, she decided to look into the Addams family's past. She opened her laptop and began searching for information. It didn't take long to find an old obituary for Ryan's mother. She had died in a car accident 2 years ago. The article mentioned that she was a teacher and beloved in the community. Emily kept digging. She found a few articles about George, mostly about his work as a mechanic. There was nothing unusual, nothing that explained Ryan's behavior. Frustrated, she closed the laptop and went to bed. A week passed without incident. Emily tried to convince herself that she was overthinking things, but her instincts wouldn't let it go. Then, one evening, Jake came home with a strange story. "Mom, guess what Ryan showed me today?" he said excitedly as he sat down at the dinner table. "What did he show you?" Emily asked, her stomach tightening. "He took me to the woods," Jake said. "He said there's a secret place where no one goes. He showed me a treehouse. It's so cool, Mom. But he said I can't tell anyone about it." Emily's fork froze midway to her mouth. "Jake, you went into the woods? I told you not to go there." Jake looked guilty. "I'm sorry, Mom. Ryan said it was okay." Emily forced herself to stay calm. "Listen, Jake. I don't want you going into the woods again. Okay? It's dangerous." "Okay, Mom," Jake said quietly, "but it's really cool. Ryan said he goes there all the time." Emily's mind was racing. The woods, the missing children, the photos, everything seemed connected. She needed to find that treehouse. The next day, when Ryan came over to play, Emily decided to confront him. She waited until Jake was out of earshot, then approached Ryan in the backyard. "Ryan, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, keeping her tone friendly. Ryan looked at her warily. "What is it?" "Jake told me you showed him a treehouse in the woods," Emily said. "I don't think it's safe for him to be out there." Ryan's expression didn't change. "It's just a treehouse. There's nothing wrong with it." "Maybe," Emily said carefully, But I'd like to see it for myself. Could you show me? Ryan hesitated, then shrugged. Sure. I'll take you there tomorrow. Emily nodded, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she would find, but she was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant venturing into the woods herself. Part 5. Into the woods. The next morning, Emily prepared herself for the trip to the woods. She packed a small bag with water, her phone, and a flashlight, just in case. Ryan arrived at her door promptly after lunch, looking calm as ever. Ready? He asked, his tone neutral. Emily nodded. Let's go. Jake watched them leave, his face scrunched in confusion. Mom, why are you going with Ryan? I just want to see the treehouse you mentioned, she replied, forcing a smile. You stay here, okay? I won't be long. Jake nodded reluctantly, and Emily followed Ryan out of the yard. The woods behind the neighborhood were dense and quiet. The air smelled of damp earth and leaves, and the sunlight struggled to break through the thick canopy above. Ryan led the way, moving confidently through the overgrown trail. Emily kept close, her heart beating fast. How far is it? She asked, trying to sound casual. Not far, Ryan replied without looking back. As they walked deeper into the woods, Emily felt a growing sense of unease. The trees seemed to press closer together, and the quietness around them became eerie. She glanced over her shoulder, realizing she couldn't see the way they had come anymore. Ryan, how did you find this treehouse? She asked, hoping to keep the conversation going. I've always known about it, he said simply. It's a special place. Emily frowned. Did your dad show it to you? No, Ryan said, shaking his head. My mom used to take me here. She said it was our secret. Emily's stomach churned. The mention of Ryan's mother reminded her of the obituary she had read. She wondered what kind of secrets this family was keeping. After what felt like an eternity, Ryan stopped. He pointed ahead. There it is. Emily followed his gaze and saw a small, rickety treehouse perched high in an old oak tree. The wood was weathered and gray, and the ladder leading up to it looked like it could break at any moment. It's interesting, she said carefully. How often do you come here? Ryan shrugged. Whenever I feel like it. Emily stepped closer, inspecting the treehouse from below. There was something unsettling about it, though she couldn't quite say why. She noticed a pile of old toys and clothes near the base of the tree. Some of them looked weathered, as if they had been left there for a long time. Ryan, what's all this? She asked, pointing to the pile. Things I found, he said. Stuff people didn't want anymore. Emily crouched down, picking up a faded backpack. It looked like it had belonged to a child, with colorful stickers peeling off the sides. She unzipped it carefully and found a notebook inside. The first page had a name scribbled in messy handwriting. Megan Torres. Her breath caught. Megan Torres was one of the missing children. Ryan, where did you get this? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Ryan's expression darkened. It doesn't matter. It does matter, Emily insisted, standing up. Ryan, if you know something about these kids, you need to tell me. Did you see Megan here? Did you? I said it doesn't matter. Ryan shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. Emily took a step back, startled by his outburst. For the first time, she felt real fear. Ryan's expression softened slightly. I didn't hurt anyone, he said quietly. I wanted to help. Help with what? Emily asked, her voice shaking. They didn't want to go home, Ryan said, looking away. They were scared. I let them stay here. It was safe. Emily's mind was racing. Ryan, are you saying the missing kids came here? To the treehouse? Ryan nodded slowly. Not all of them. Just some. Emily felt a mix of relief and dread. If Ryan was telling the truth, the children might still be alive. But why hadn't he told anyone? And where were they now? Ryan, where are they now? She pressed. Are they still here? Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he climbed the ladder to the treehouse. Emily hesitated, then followed him. The inside of the treehouse was cramped and dusty. Old blankets and pillows were piled in one corner, along with a lantern and a few empty food wrappers. There were more toys and clothes scattered around, as well as a stack of books. This is where they stayed, Ryan said, sitting on the floor. I brought them food and blankets. They didn't want to leave. Emily's heart ached as she imagined frightened children hiding here, away from the world. Ryan, you should have told someone. The police, your dad, anyone. They wouldn't understand, Ryan said, shaking his head. They'd think I did something bad. But I didn't. I just wanted to help. Emily looked around the treehouse, her eyes landing on a small box in the corner. She opened it and found more photos of the missing children, along with a few handwritten notes. One of them said, "Thank you for keeping us safe." Emily's thoughts were interrupted by a noise outside. She froze, listening. It sounded like footsteps, but heavier than Ryan's. "Ryan," she whispered. "Did you hear that?" Ryan looked toward the window, his face pale. "It's him." "Who?" Emily asked, her pulse quickening. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for her to stay quiet. Emily peeked out of the window and saw a figure moving through the trees. It was George. He was carrying something in his hand. A shovel. "What is he doing here?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "He followed us," Ryan said, his voice trembling. "He doesn't want you to know." Emily's mind raced. What didn't George want her to know? Was he involved in the disappearances too? She felt trapped, unsure of what to do next. George stopped beneath the treehouse and looked up. "Ryan? Emily? I know you're up there." Emily's heart pounded. She glanced at Ryan, who looked terrified. Whatever secrets this family was hiding, she was about to uncover them. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she might not like what she found. Part 6. The Final Truth. Emily held her breath as George stood below the treehouse, staring up at them. The woods were so silent that every rustle of leaves sounded louder than it should. George's voice broke the stillness. "Come down," he called, his tone firm but not angry. "We need to talk." Emily looked at Ryan. His face was pale, his hands trembling. She whispered, "What does he want?" Ryan shook his head. "He knows. He always knows." Emily didn't understand what Ryan meant, but there was no time to ask. George called again, his voice louder this time. "Emily, it's not safe up there. Come down." Reluctantly, Emily made her way down the creaky ladder. Ryan stayed where he was, clutching the edge of the treehouse like it was his only lifeline. When she reached the ground, George stepped closer. His face was shadowed by the trees, making it hard to read his expression. "What are you doing out here?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I could ask you the same thing," George replied. He glanced up at the treehouse. "Ryan, come down now." Ryan hesitated, then slowly climbed down. He stood next to Emily, keeping his eyes fixed on the ground. George sighed and leaned on the shovel he was carrying. "I didn't want you to find this place, Emily. Not like this." "What do you mean?" Emily asked, her voice sharp. "Ryan said the missing kids stayed here. He was trying to help them." George shook his head. "Ryan doesn't understand the whole picture. He doesn't know the danger he's been putting himself in." "Danger?" Emily repeated, confused. "What danger?" George looked at Ryan, his face filled with both anger and sadness. "Ryan, you shouldn't have brought her here. You promised me you wouldn't." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Dad. I just wanted her to know the truth." Emily felt a chill run through her. "George, what truth? What's going on?" George took a deep breath, as if preparing himself to say something he had been holding in for a long time. "Years ago, this place was a secret spot for my wife and me. We used to bring Ryan here when he was little. But after she passed, Ryan started coming here alone. He wanted to feel close to her." Emily nodded, encouraging him to continue. "Then one day he started bringing kids here," George said. "At first, I thought he was just making friends. But then I realized these weren't ordinary kids. They were kids who were lost, scared, or running from something." "You knew about the missing children?" Emily asked, horrified. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" George's expression hardened. "Because I didn't want the wrong people finding out. The woods are dangerous, Emily. There's something out here that takes them." Emily's stomach churned. "What are you talking about? What takes them?" "I don't know what it is," George admitted, his voice low. "But I've seen it. A shadow moving between the trees. It doesn't belong here. It doesn't stop until it finds what it's looking for." Emily felt her knees weaken. This couldn't be real. It sounded like something out of a nightmare. "You're saying something took those kids?" George nodded grimly. "That's why I told Ryan to stay away from here. But he kept coming back, trying to help the others. He thought this place was safe, but it's not." Ryan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It didn't hurt me, Dad. It only goes after the kids who are alone." Emily's heart broke as she looked at Ryan. He had been risking his life to protect these children, and no one had been there to guide him. "Is it still here?" she asked George, her voice shaking. "I don't know," George said, "but we need to leave. Now." As they turned to go, a sudden noise froze them in place. It was a low, guttural sound like a growl. Emily's blood ran cold as she turned toward the source of the noise. Between the trees, a shadow moved. It was tall and dark, with no clear shape. It didn't walk. It glided, as if it were floating above the ground. "Run!" George shouted, grabbing Emily's arm. They sprinted back toward the trail, Ryan close behind. The shadow followed, moving faster than seemed possible. Emily's chest burned as she ran, her heart pounding in her ears. She didn't dare look back. "Don't stop!" George yelled. They burst out of the woods into the open field behind the neighborhood. The shadow stopped at the edge of the trees, as if it couldn't leave the forest. Emily turned and saw it watching them, its form melting into the darkness until it disappeared completely. Back at the house, Emily locked all the doors and windows, her hands shaking. George sat at the kitchen table, his face pale. Ryan clung to Emily, his small frame trembling. "What was that?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. George shook his head. "I don't know. But it's been here for a long time. Longer than any of us." Emily thought of the missing children. Had they been taken by that thing? Or were they still alive somewhere, hiding from it? In the days that followed, Emily couldn't shake the events in the woods. She reported everything to the police, but without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. The case of the missing children remained unsolved, but Emily couldn't give up hope. She kept a close eye on Ryan, who seemed quieter than ever. George moved out of the neighborhood, taking Ryan with him. Emily didn't blame him. She often found herself staring at the edge of the woods, wondering if the shadow was still out there. As time passed, life returned to normal. But Emily knew the truth. The shadow was real, and it was still waiting, and some secrets were better left undiscovered. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.